As your ballots start to arrive in the mail in the next few days, it's become clear that we are now in the kind of the dog days of the campaign, or the and we want to discuss here about how we got here, what we've learned during this campaign season, and what are we going to do going forward? Not just if we happen to win, but this isn't just about one election. There's a mindset that needs to change in the political structure, and that doesn't happen with just one election. Whether I win or lose, that mindset needs to change. And we can only do that by examining how we got here, examining what we've learned, and spreading that knowledge. And so, for those of you who are finding us for the first time, we might want to explain a bit about how I got here and essentially how I got here. Born and raised in Sacramento. My grandfather's house essentially rescued me when life was at its lowest. That love of family and community allowed me to rebuild myself and my family into something that their community could eventually turn to and say, can you do something? Can you try to help? And when political operatives from within my party and out had asked me about running for office, I told them no. But when a fellow gig worker asked me to try and run for office, to try to do something about AB 5, I couldn't say no, because that was no longer about politics. That was about people. That was about individuals getting run over by a system that caters to activist groups and interest groups and lobbyists and big businesses, while it runs over the individual who doesn't want to gather in those type of groups, who just wants to live their life. That's the real problem we are facing, is that our politics no longer represents us. It's become so toxic in such a quest for power, a quest for the next seat, a quest for a political career, that the average person's wants, needs, and desires are no longer heard. Not everybody can get everything they want, and I think that's understood, but everybody can be heard. Peoples whose political interests are different than the prevailing thought shouldn't be dismissed. They should be heard and empathized with if possible. The vast majority of us want the same things out of life. We want to be able to go about our day without too much interference from forces beyond our control. We want to be safe and secure in our homes. We want our families to have a good education and a potential good future. And can we actually say that most of us are getting that? But how about the most vulnerable? I don't think we can. And in a state where those have been the alleged priorities for 2 decades, 3 decades now, it's inexcusable. And what I've learned during this process is that it's the process itself that corrupts. It's not the money. The money feeds it, but the money doesn't corrupt it. We do. Politicians, activists, lobbyists, businesses. People who want to use the system for their own benefit at the expense of the person down the street. Because they don't think of it at the expense of the person down the street. They think of it as just benefiting them. And it's one thing to lose your job or to lose your lifestyle over, changes in society, changes in the market. Technology changes. And, the old way of doing things no longer works. It's bad enough to lose your job that way, to live your lifestyle. It's another thing completely to have people who claim to speak for you but have no interest in what you want, needs, or desires are, force that change upon you, which is what's happened with AB5. And the consequences of that go far beyond just employment. It ripped the culture out of many places because many community groups could no longer operate. Writers could no longer write. Cartoonists could no longer cartoon. And while they've claimed to fix some of these industries, the very fact that you needed 100 fixes shows how disastrous that bill was. But it was the mindset and the process that created the problem. We spend so much time arguing over policy, but we don't argue over philosophy that guides that policy. We pretend it's morally superior, but is it? You say, we're helping people. This is true, but you're also hurting people. You can't hurt people while you're helping people and claim to be morally superior. You can make an argument that in the long run it benefits more than not, but you damn well shouldn't be morally superior about it because you're hurting people. You can never be morally superior when you're hurting people. What I've also learned is that you don't need a lot of money to run for politics. You just don't. You need more than we have, don't get me wrong, and if you have some, please send it our way. Links will be put in the description. But the money isn't the problem. See, you could run an effective campaign for less than $50,000. You could do it, especially if you belong to a big party where you have access to volunteers. So the question is, why are people raising hundreds and thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, to run for office? What is that money actually buying if it's not buying campaigning? Because it simply isn't necessary. There's something else besides access to policy. Eisenhower warned us about the military-industrial complex. And we've seen that same mindset kind of manifest itself in education, in certain aspects of the homelessness industrial complex. They talk about that up in Seattle specifically. But the political industrial complex is quite real. When you're spending a third to two-thirds of the money you raise to raise money, are you a political campaign? Or are you a jobs program for your political buddies? That's the real game. They don't really care much about us, except they need our votes. And I need yours. The difference is, I talk to you, the individual. And yes, if you get under the dome, you've got to deal with lobbyists and interest groups and activists. But with me, they don't act in privacy. With me, they must act in public, in a transparent fashion, so you know what they're asking for. But to end on a positive note, the last thing I have learned is there is hope, and lots of it. Because what I have learned is that the average individual has had enough. They want better, and they're willing to change. They're willing to look at new solutions. They're willing to look at new mindsets. They're willing to experiment carefully, as long as we are transparent. And that's the only thing I promise, is that I will be transparent. Thank you for your time. Have a good evening. And please remember to love everybody.